Nurullah, is gonna join us, and also Azim. Yes, Irene is here.
Oh, okay.
Also,
Yes, okay, great.
Irene brought him as far as yes. Actually, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the discussion panel being sponsored by the artist and research program at Columbia State College in Long Island, New York. Women's life freedom, the multinational perspective of the oppressed in Iran. We are very honored for the opportunity of having distinguished speakers from Europe and North America. I would like to take, actually because our first speaker, he's going to start in 2 minutes as per schedule, because I was expecting if something happens or if we have delays. So that's because we have time. Actually, I would like to just tell about what motivated me to organize this event. I'm from Iran, and I, as a woman, and belong to minority in Iran. So as you may heard, since September 2022, there is an uprising in Iran following the death of a young girl who was killed by police in Tehran. Mahsa Jina Amini was a Kurd and traveled to Tehran for a visit. Death of her sparked protests in different regions in Iran, especially among women and young generation like schoolgirls, religion minorities, and non-Persian, especially non-Persian nationals. Since then, hundreds were killed by Iranian regimes and thousands got arrested. But opposition in Iranian diaspora with power, who also control mainstream, instead of reflecting the true side of women and multinational revolution, they completely are neglecting them. Please accept today we are here to hear from several speakers from underrepresented groups of Iran. So that's, I would like to thank you all audience they joined us, also our speaker. So I think we are out of time. So if Aileen is actually ready, we can go ahead and start. So Aileen, are you here?
Yes, sorry. Just give me 1 second. We're running out of time.
Yes, please repeat your plans over so we can actually wait you and was born in Sweden to a Turkish family originally from the West Azerbaijan province of Iran. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you very much for having me. The sound is okay? You're hearing me all right? Perfect. Thank you so much again for having me, but more so for arranging this and for shedding light on what is happening right now in Iran. I truly believe in the importance in history making by the world's first feminist revolution, and I'm hopeful that this will be successful. But yes, also active in the issues of foreign affairs. So happy to be here. And like Ms. Nani said, I was born in Sweden, but my parents are from South Olmağı and Harayım, and Turkish, and not actually a minority in Iran. As you know, Iran is a Muslim country. Azerbaijan are largely, but there are also Kurds, Kurdish. It is a very diverse country with different nations, different ethnicities around it. Diversity there, and I'll come back to this. So when I look at what is third, there's the gender hatred from the regime towards these women. And I'll focus on the latter two, the ethnic perspective and the gender perspective. Firstly, the Islamic regime has a very deliberate policy of making life very difficult for people of different backgrounds. You have no right to culture, no right to identity, no right to your own mother tongue, and you have a deliberate policy of making life very difficult. And an example is the Unutmayalım. The Unutmayalım was the second largest salt movement in the world, but is now almost deliberately by the government as a way of making life impossible for the millions of people living around the world, which are a majority of non-Christians and Christians. So when the lake is finally carried out, the life that would be impossible, there would be enormous salt winds forcing people to migrate. And that's the end game of this regime, to make people leave. And then second, there's the gender discrimination. And there was something that my aunt told me that has stuck with me all these years. When my parents fled from Iran, my father and my mother were politically active, demanding nothing radical than their own identity But when they left Iran, my father's family were imprisoned as an act of revenge from the Islamic regime. And my aunt, who was then, she was just a child, a young girl, she was at the age of 14, 15. She was put in prison, and she has described it to me that her friends, young girls at the age of 13, who were sentenced to death, would firstly be raped by the mullahs. The mullahs described this as an act of justice, as something that needed to be done, because if these girls were to be sentenced to death, they shouldn't end up in heaven. And as a virgin, there's a risk of ending up in heaven. So they would rape the children, the young girls, before sentencing them to death. That's just an example of what this regime has done to women and young girls for decades. They use Islam as an excuse for their own hateful, chauvinistic agenda. A woman's worth in Iran is literally half of a man's, literally. And being a woman in Iran is facing, you know, an impossible situation. And if you also on top of being a woman have a different ethnic background, that's an intersection of discrimination, such as the case for Mahsa Amini, who were brutally killed and has sparked the revolution going on. So I think it's important to understand that what is occurring in Iran is an intersection of, the threefold discrimination. There's the overall discrimination, there's the ethnic discrimination, and then there's the gender discrimination on top of that. So now women and young girls in Iran are saying enough is enough. And what they are demanding is human rights. It's equality, it's justice, it's truly a just cause for the bare minimum, and it is our obligation to support them, to support our brothers and sisters fighting for freedom and fighting for equality. It is our obligation to say that your struggle is also our struggle, and to raise our voices, to use our platforms in any way that we can, whether it be the Swedish Parliament or as a student, as a researcher, whatever. It is our obligation to use our voices and our platforms to continue to put pressure on the Islamic regime and to demand what the people are demanding: freedom and equality and justice. I forgot to time myself, so I'm not sure how long I have left, but I'll end by saying that
You have time.
I have time. Okay, great. I'll also say that as a feminist myself, I believe that because this revolution is a feminist revolution, the prosperity of it, the successful ratio is higher. And this is not just a value, but backed up in research. When women are given a seat at the table, when women are part of negotiating peace or part of taking political decisions, those decisions are also more sustainable. So I think that, not just think, I'm certain that these demands for change and the movement that we're seeing will cause history. I'll also say, if I can end with something from a Swedish point of view, and as a social democrat, we are now in opposition, unfortunately, since the last election, but we are the biggest political group in parliament. And when we created government in 2014, the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, Social Democrat, he declared the world's first feminist government, but with that also the world's first feminist foreign policy. And I would truly, wish that more countries would follow. A feminist foreign policy is based on 3 pillars: women's rights, women's resources, and women's representation. We demand these 3 R's in everywhere where we can raise our voice, because we know that when women are part of negotiations, as I said, or when women are given the chance to strengthen themselves, that creates real change. So I would urge the US to also follow and to adapt a feminist foreign policy and a promise to always prioritize women and girls when we raise our voices, because that is truly needed. So what we are seeing now is just the beginning, and although the protests have slowed down a bit, they're still occurring all over Iran, and the crackdowns of the regime are growing extensively. We are seeing, for example, how young schoolgirls all over the country in more than 100 schools have been poisoned. So now is truly the time to not get tired, but to continue to support the feminist, courageous revolution that is taking place in Iran. So I'll end here, and thank you again for having this seminar conference, and thank you again for the invitation to speak.
Thank you, Aylin. Dear Aylin, you highlighted very important points. Thank you so much. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
Our second presenter is Wahid. Are you here, Wahid?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Also, yeah, we are ahead of time. That's good, because if that means we're gonna finish on time. So, Wahid Garabali, Turkish language activist. Wahid is currently pursuing a master's degree in education and society at McGill University. His research interests include social linguistic, multilingual education, minority issues, and critical discourse analysis. He also writes articles for the Caspian Post as a freelance journalist. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to begin my talk by expressing my gratitude to the organizers for putting together this important event. It's a privilege for me to have the chance to speak on a critical issue, the ongoing struggles for sovereignty and democracy among Iran's marginalized communities. In my speech today, I will explore the complex issue of power and sovereignty in Iran through an intersectional and socio-historical lens, considering various sociopolitical forces and social factors. These factors include gender, sexuality, language, ethnicity, class, region, and religion. Through this lens, I will examine the struggles of historically marginalized groups within these categories and contexts to reclaim their agency and reshape power dynamics. Their goal is not only recognition, but also active participation in decision-making and issues that concern them. By challenging existing power structures and demanding inclusion in the democratic process, these groups are working towards a democratic, inclusive, and socially just future. In the early 20th century, a group of Western-educated Iranian intellectuals, such as Hassan Tagizadeh, Hassan Kazimzadeh Iran-Shah, Taghi Arani, and Mahmoud Afshar, laid the ideological foundation for the formation of the Persian-centric and centralist nation-state of Iran in the coming years. These nationalist and modernist intellectuals saw ethno-linguistic diversity and regional autonomies as obstacles to their vision of central government dominated by single language, ethnicity, and nationality, Persian or Farsi. The vision of nationalist intellectuals was soon enforced by Reza Khan, an army officer who came to power in 1921 through a British-backed military coup and later became the first Pahlavi monarch. Reza Shah's regime pursued the goal of establishing a centralized state with brutal force, resulting in the marginalization of various ethnic, regional, and political power centers in Azerbaijan, Arabistan, Kurdistan, Fars, Turkmenistan, Gilan, Loristan, and other parts of the country. As a result, ethnic groups such as Turks, Kurds, Arabs, Lors, Turkmens, Baluchs, Gilaks, and others were subjected to military campaigns that resulted in countless deaths, imprisonment, exile, and the execution of community leaders. In addition, forced resettlement, land confiscation, and heavy taxation were imposed on these groups, leading to economic hardship and weakening their political and economic power. The Pahlavi regime's implementation of a centralized state not only led to the oppression of ethnic and regional groups, but also disrupted the rich cultural, political, and intellectual activities in regions like Azerbaijan or Gilan. These regions were home to some of the country's most prominent intellectual and political centers. Take the example of Tabriz, a thriving hub of intellectual and political activity, where various movements, including the Constitutional Revolution, were born. This major Turkish populated city was home to prominent revolutionaries such as Sattar Khan, Bagir Khan, Sheikh Mohammed Khiyabani, and many others. Tabriz was also a center for publishing houses and different communities of learners, where people with different beliefs and ideas used to engage in lively political discussions through their journals and gatherings. However, during Reza Shah's reign, these vibrant cultural and intellectual activities were brutally suppressed and erased, as he saw the regions like Azerbaijan as a security threat to his centralized rule, rather than vibrant and essential parts of the country. The consequences of these actions were severe, causing significant harm to these communities that continue to this day as they struggle to regain their political and cultural identities. Reza Shah's policies aim to centralize power in Tehran by systematically depriving the peripheries of political, economic, linguistic, and symbolic power. This enabled the loose form of federalism of the Qajar era, which had recognized the country's multinational, multicultural, and multilingual reality. While all ethnic groups were previously allowed to use, study, and develop their languages and cultures, the Pahlavi regime declared Farsi as the sole official language and medium of instruction, even though less than half of the Iranian population spoke it. The decision to declare Persian as Iran's official and national language was a political and ideological choice to reinforce the Persian-speaking's dominance over the country's multinational groups. In this ethno-linguistic and nationalist project, the Persian language and Persianness have been constructed as normative and privileged identities and represented as the norm. At the same time, the rest of the ethnic and linguistic communities were judged, stigmatized, and positioned as threatening outsiders, needing assimilation to be considered insiders. This narrative of portraying Persians as true and authentic Iranians have shaped the sense of entitlement and superiority among the dominant Persian-speaking community members who embody the values and norms of the dominant group and benefit from the exclusion and marginalization of others. In other words, this power is not just institutional, discursive, and structural, but also psychological. The idealization of Persian centrality and the marginalization and the social construction of non-dominant regions and ethno-linguistic groups as threatening others to national self and center has been used to justify violence, exclusion, and discrimination that are deeply embedded in society's social, economic, and political structures. Moreover, the sense of entitlement and power enabled the regime and dominant group members to dismiss the needs and demands of minoritized communities and label them as anti-national elements such as separatists, pan-Turkists, or pan-Arabists, and persecute them if they sought to restore their taken away sovereignty and challenge their socio-political, economic, linguistic, and cultural marginalization. Members of marginalized ethnic and linguistic communities have consistently sought to restore their political autonomy and challenge the power structure perpetuating their marginalization. For instance, with the weakening of the central government during World War II, an opportunity arose for the emergence of two autonomous republics that lasted for a year, from 1945 to 1946. Turks established the Azerbaijan People's Government, while Kurds founded the Mahabad Republic. During this period, Turkish became the language of education, government, radio, newspapers, and music in Azerbaijan. However, Muhammad Reza Shah commanded the army to intervene in the region and forcefully overthrew the governments, leading to the massacre of thousands, imprisonment, and exile of many. The regime also organized events to burn Turkish textbooks and committed numerous human rights violations. Similarly, in 1979, with the Islamic Revolution in Iran and overthrow of the Pahlavi regime, marginalized communities called for autonomy in their regions, an end to ethnic and linguistic assimilation, and the implementation of mother tongue-based education. Muhammad Kazım Shariat Madari from Azerbaijan even questioned Khomeini's vision of religious regime and called for autonomy for Azerbaijan. However, the responded by putting him under house arrest and executing some of his followers. The government engaged in violent conflict with Kurdish groups in Kurdish regions. The Turkmen and Baluch communities also raised calls for autonomy, but also too were met with violent suppression. In the recent women life freedom protests, marginalized communities in Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Balochistan, Gilan, Turkmen Sahara, Ahvaz, and other regions have actively highlighted the issue of sovereignty. They also experienced the highest casualties and most violent forms of government suppression against protesters. The call for sovereignty takes various forms, including regional, political, gender, linguistic, environmental, and more. For example, in Turkish populated cities and Azerbaijan, the slogan freedom, justice, and national government has become popular, along with the call for freedom for women, sovereignty for nations. Additionally, members of these communities in the diaspora have organized protests or attended rallies while carrying their respective flags and discussing the idea of centralized Iran in the future, where power is shared. Despite the ongoing struggle for greater sovereignty and democratization in Iran, mainstream opposition groups have largely ignored the voices and concerns of marginalized communities. As a result, these groups continue to face significant challenges in their fight against the Iranian regime and the dominant discourses, ideologies, and power structures, which are also prevalent among opposition groups. Marginalized community members are frequently excluded from events, media, and panels, and are often required to pledge loyalty to the centralist and nationalist system. Consequently, it's a constant struggle for these groups to challenge and disrupt the exclusionary nature of centralist notions of the nation, which is crucial in achieving inclusion and democracy for all Iranians. The construction of the other and marginalization in Iranian society is not only based on linguistic and ethnic differences, but also intersected with other forms of oppression, such as gender, sexuality, religion, region, and social class. Therefore, in the context of the Women Life Reading campaign, the goals and the struggles cannot be reduced to a single issue. It is not only about the state's power, but also the power relation between different groups within the nation state. Moreover, the struggle for sovereignty is often fought within many intersected social spaces, particularly for marginalized groups whose sovereignty has been historically denied on multiple bases. The sovereignty in Iran is not only ethnic and linguistically defined, but also gender, religion, and regionally. The government controls women's bodies by enforcing dress codes, discriminatory laws, patriarchal norms, and practices that limit their movement, access to certain social spaces, and political participation. Thus, by reclaiming gender sovereignty, Turkish women in Azerbaijan can strengthen their struggle to restore regional sovereignty. This effort has the potential to challenge intersecting forms of oppression based on factors such as gender, class, region, environment, and ethnicity. One such example is the ecological damage and exploitation of Azerbaijan's Verzigan gold mines, which transported 1,000 kilometers away to Kerman, a Persian-speaking city, worsening regional inequalities. Moreover, the Iranian state used sovereignty to regulate sexual and gender identities, particularly in the context of discrimination against LGBTQ individuals. Laws criminalizing homosexuality and transgender identities. Furthermore, it's important to note that religious intersects with other social hierarchies in Iran, which sovereignty is defined in relation to Shia Muslims. This has resulted in the marginalization and discrimination of religious minorities, such as Sunnis, Baha'is, and Alawis. Additionally, these religious communities are regionally, ethnically, and linguistically marginalized, further exacerbating, worsening their marginalization and limiting their access to resources and opportunities, such as economic, educational, and political. During my presentation, I aim to demonstrate that various forms of sovereignty in Iran have been historically constructed in ways that perpetuate interconnected forms of marginalization. In particular, illegitimate and dominant forms of sovereignty have been employed to legitimize the domination of certain groups and justify the subjugation of others. As a result, it is imperative to critically examine the concept of sovereignty and acknowledge the intersectionality of different power positions in the construction and contestation of it. We must recognize the sovereignty of marginalized communities, as it is crucial to understanding and challenging systems of power and domination. To achieve this goal, we need to develop an alternative conception of sovereignty that is not based on domination, but on relationality, recognizing the diversity and complexity of human experiences and positionalities. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity again.
Thank you for a very interesting and informative talk.
There is a comment. There is a comment in the chat. It says autonomy is a constitutional right that was granted to the state of, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce it, Azerbaijan by the first constitution of Iran, 1906.
Yeah, that's true. That was recognized in the constitution of 1906.
Great, thanks. So actually we continue with our next speaker. So actually I forgot to mention to audience, if you have any question, please put in the chat box. So at the end, we actually consider your questions. So thank you. So our next and third speaker is Tara Azizi, human rights lawyer of Kurdish origin. Tara is a human rights lawyer based in Washington, D.C. and currently holds the position of International Legal Director at a Human Rights Law Center. Tara has been working directly with victims of human rights abuses from vulnerable communities and minorities. Please, Tara.
You're currently muted.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. Thank you so much, Nahid, and the rest of the organization to the seminar for inviting me, for having me for this panel discussion. Iran, as we all know, and previous speakers have emphasized, Iran is a very diverse country. And when I saw the topic of this panel discussion, it immediately caught my eyes because the topic allows us to provide a much needed, well-needed intersectional perspectives when analyzing the ongoing situation in Iran right now. So the topic of this webinar I want to emphasize is highly relevant and well-needed. So thank you so much for that and for inviting me. So I'm a human rights lawyer. I'm based in Washington, D.C., as Nahid mentioned, working on significant legal cases, some of them against the Iranian regime, states, and individuals. And I'm working now with as an international legal director with Harichi Human Rights Law Center. So it needs to be emphasized when we dive into this diversity and understanding of this discrimination that it is estimated that at least half of Iran's population is based on ethnic and religious minorities. So half of Iran's population is based on ethnic and religious minority. That also shows how diverse it is and why the Iranian regime need to use some methods to, in their views, see these as a threat and gain the control of the region. So people of minority groups in Iran, they face disproportionate economic, environmental, and health challenges. And what I'm about to say right now, it's fact and statistics from UN Special Rapporteur, UN agencies, and established human rights organizations, and also information I receive as a human rights lawyer in my daily work. Iran's ethnic minorities, they inhabit the state's poorest provinces in Iran, and they receive the lowest level of government services and infrastructures. This is also a fact. The central power in Iran, in Tehran, they do not offer a political model of inclusion to these ethnic minorities. And the regime, they go to extreme lengths to repress and oppress ethnic minorities. I will describe this as a systematic discrimination that has been ongoing for many years. This is not something new. This is not something that was brought to attention due to the tragic, brutal death of Jina Mahsa Amini. This has been ongoing in Iran, but there are increased international attention to this issue due to the movement in Iran that we've been seeing the past months. The Iranian regime, they have also, I just want to emphasize the length, extreme length that the Iranian regime are taking in order to oppress and suppress its minorities. They have ordered and carried out assassinations of leaders and oppositionals of Iran's ethnic minorities outside of Iran, in particular in Europe. The fact that ethnic minorities, they form a majority in several strategic locations in Iran, also possess some kind of threat to the regime and its powers, because, for instance, I'm going to bring some example why. In Khuzestan province, which is the center of Iran's oil production, so very important strategic place for Iran. And if I'm going to bring another example to you, Iran's strategic port is located in Sistan, Baluchistan. So there are some strategic locations for the Iranian regime that is dominated by ethnic and religious minorities. So this severe oppression against minorities and the ethnic and religious minority in Iran has been ongoing, and there are report and documentation who clearly said that this is a big issue in Iran. And when analyzing this discrimination, if we're not applying an intersectional perspective, as I emphasized when we started, it will not be easy to see why this is an issue, and also how we can move forward in order to make sure that we arrange platforms that are inclusive to discuss about the ongoing human rights violations in Iran right now, but also to hold perpetrators accountable for these violations. That's super important. As a human rights lawyer, I keep emphasizing that. So who was Jina Mahsa Amini? She was a Kurdish woman visiting Tehran, as been one of the speakers also mentioned. She was brutally beaten to death in Tehran by the so-called morality police because she didn't obey, although she was wearing a hijab, but she didn't wear the hijab properly according to the Islamic rules and the dress codes. So she was beaten to death due to this. And this created a rage amongst the Kurdish community and in Kurdish areas because this oppression and systematic discrimination against Kurds and other minorities have been there for such a long time. The high rate of unemployment in the minority areas truly affect the daily life of people living in minority areas, but also gender perspective, to be a woman and also belonging to an ethnic minority. So the death of Jina Mahsa Amini created a rage amongst the community and started this slogan in Kurdish areas: women, life, freedom, Jinjian Azadi. And this slogan made it to all over Iran and created a united movement. And we saw also that this solidarity that unifies the people of Iran, a lot of people from other regions, especially ethnic and religious minorities, could relate to what happened to Jina Mahsa Amini due to these several intersectional perspectives. And there's limited time, but I want to, a lot of people say, can you amplify, or can you, exemplify the oppression against Kurds. And since I was asked to talk also about the Kurdish group, I'm going to use an example now, the simplest example of oppression. I have used this example before when I'm talking about the ongoing situation in Iran here in the US, and I'm going to reuse this as much as needed to explain the intersectional discrimination that Kurds and other minorities face in Iran. This is a citate from a report presented by the UN Special Rapporteur on Iran, Javid Rahman, a couple of months ago in the United Nations. He said, Gina is a Kurdish name, but she was not allowed to use that name on the national register because the state does not allow Kurdish identity or Kurdish expression in any shape or form. I think that this example, the simplest example of oppression that I can provide you, have other examples of detention, torture, arresting people without any charges, randomly arresting people at the street. But this is the simplest example of oppression that is the daily life of Kurds and other minorities in Iran today. And what happened when this movement started and spread to all over Iran, and we heard chanting in Tehran, from Kurdistan to Tehran, in solidarity with all Iranians. We all saw pictures and videos in CNN and social media about, we saw the heavily armed vehicles going into the Kurdish areas and other areas, Balochistan, heavily armed military against unarmed people. That was how the Iranian regime and authorities unfortunately responded to this movement, to this civil, peaceful movement in demanding for cultural rights, language rights, I would say basic freedoms and human rights. And this is how the regime, instead of changing its attitude towards its people and actually see this is something that's been going on for a while now, they increased the violence and used severe crackdown and violence against, especially against minority areas, such as the Kurdish areas who have been under heavily armed from the Iranian regime for a long time, unfortunately. So I have to mention that the Kurds, they are 10% of Iran's total population. So it's not that much, they're a minority, but I want to give you another example that are 10% of the total population of Iran. But these are numbers before the uprising, pre-uprising. And the Kurds represent half of the political prisoners in Iran right now. They are 10% of the total population, but represent half of the political prisoners in Iran. So just also to exemplify the oppression as oppression against minorities and ethnic groups. So Iran's ethnic minorities, they are subject to disproportional high rates of execution based on data and reports from the UN and other established international organizations. Why did this movement, Women Life Freedom Movement, spread so widely? Thanks to social media. In the past, Iranian people, they have a history of demonstrating, taking to the streets and risk their lives in demand for freedom and human rights and democracy. But this time they had the phone, they had social media, they had different ways of communicating with the international community and media and lawyers outside. So I think that is definitely one of the reasons why we also could apply an intersectional perspective to what's happening in Iran today. And I know that a lot of lawyers and organizations did emphasize that Gina, she was a Kurdish and she's a woman. And I'm glad to see, although it's horrible to receive reports about detention, killing, and torture, but I'm glad to see that these perspectives are applied this time and that this movement is creating, the debate is still ongoing. And I think it's so vital and important that we keep reporting, that we keep collecting evidence. And as we saw, after so many years, the international community established an independent investigative mechanism to hold perpetrators accountable. This is also a long process, but at least some kind of justice mechanism that we see right now. And I really hope that the work that's been starting can continue. I don't know how much time I have left, Nahid.
We have time, just
Okay, so I'm just gonna
a few minutes.
quickly wrap it up. Thank you. So also, the first speaker mentioned the regulation in Sweden and Europe, but as I am practicing in the US, I think that European countries and also Sweden should use the US as an example in terms of starting. They don't even acknowledge Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, or the IRGC and what they're doing to their people as those kind of acts and international acts, like international terrorism acts. So I think definitely, because they receive some kind of role model to the US, I really hope European countries and Sweden are seeing the regulation that is available in the US right now and the tools that US citizens actually have to hold perpetrators accountable, Iranian authorities accountable for what they're doing to its citizens. So that would be my hope, that this discussion started in the within European countries, but also they're far behind. And I really hope that they also see that these acts by the Iranian regime and its authorities should be looked upon as we're doing it here in the US under FSIA regulation. But also that we continue this discussion, make sure that the light is on what's going on in Iran and the attention is still on human rights violations, and that we do not go back to before this uprising, focusing on nuclear deal and other issues, and where when suppression against minority and ethnic groups were behind in the shadow of everything else that was going on in Iran. Thank you so much. If there's any question, I'm going to leave room for that. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, dear Tara, for your great information. Thank you so much. So now we move to our next guest speaker, Nahid Farhad. Dear Nahid, are you here?
Because she's currently muted.
Yes, I'm just...
She's back.
Okay.
We can see her and hear her.
Great. Nahid Farhad, a human rights activist. She's a human rights activist and political activist based in United States. In US, she has worked with the Center for Human Rights Documentation for about 8 years. Nahid has extensively contributed to Persian language media as a commentator. Thank you. Nahid, please go ahead.
Thank you, Darajan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
I think I think there is a problem with your voice.
Your audio is off. Not off, but it doesn't sound right.
Can you hear me?
Barely. Might I suggest you exit the room, come back in, and see if that fixes the problem? I believe she took my advice.
Hello, can you hear me?
It's the same.
I don't know, what should I do?
Can you use like headsets? Maybe it helps.
Or there is a way for them to call you. If you click on the More button way up at the top, there's 3 dots that says Call Me. You can give it a landline phone number. You'd be on video in the room, and then audio would be through a telephone if you have one available to you.
How can you choose this call? I I suggest you go with the next guest or speaker, and
Okay.
then we can have you after that.
Okay, sounds good. Dear Mona, are you here? Mona Silavi?
Yes, I am here, but sorry, I thought I would be in the place that I can open my camera, but I'm unable to open my camera. So if it's okay, I only talk without my camera on.
Yes, so if you cannot.
I really accept my sincere apologies. Yes, actually, what I didn't
Please.
want to...
Please, just let me actually introduce you first, and
sorry.
then you go ahead. Okay. So, Mona Silavi, women rights activist, Arab Al-Ahwazi. Mona Silavi holds a master's degree in clinical and social psychology and is currently working on Belgium Red Cross. Mona is the co-founder of women rights organization called Voice of Ahwazi. She's a spokeswoman of Democratic Solidarity Party of Al-Ahwaz, DSPA, since 2018. Thank you. Mona, please, mic is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And I see that speakers, all of them, they mentioned common points about minorities in Iran, ethnic minorities in Iran. I would like to emphasize that we talking about ethnic minorities in Iran and Persian domination on the other minorities and central government that's actually promoting Persian language as a sole language, and it's not in any way any hatred toward Persian as an ethnicity or as a language, as we grow up with this language. Personally, I love literature in Persian. I enjoy reading it, and it is for me even easier to read Persian literature more than my mother tongue in Arabic. But the problem is here that in countries in Middle East, but also I hold a degree in good governance in Middle East and North Africa. The problem is in Middle East that we have this idea that the countries should be centralized. Like we would have only India with the one religion, Hindu. That's what we see now is going on in India. Or we see division of India and Pakistan. It's a country only for Muslim and in quotation Sunni. And then we have Iran in Middle East, a country only for Persian, for Shiite. This way of looking at the countries, at the way that the nation built, it gives a really fascistic way of ruling a country, and it closed the door toward a democracy and diversity in the countries. That's the main problem that we are talking here. So it is not in any way against any other nation. So in Iran, it is a multi-ethnic country, but the problem is also a lot of thinkers and writers in Iran that mostly are from Persian or extremely Persian assimilated people. They refuse even to accept the fact that Iran is multi-ethnic country. And for my case, as an Arab, I would have said we also are in a dilemma of Iran because they adapted Persian as the sole, I would have said, element of the culture for this country. We have also history of animosity between Arabs and Persians, and it affects Arabs in Iran. So we mostly called Arab speakers, Arabophone, not accepting that we are Arab. Personally, some people even ask me, when you're going to go back to your own country, as if we are immigrant and we are not living in this country for years and years. Some of them even blaming us, like Arabs, we are the reason for downfall of Iran. Yeah, that's the problem in Iran, that this idea of not accepting that there is other nation in Iran, and we can actually rule the country in other way. And why also are we talking about these ethnicities? Because this extreme central government that does not divide the authority between other provinces that has minorities lead to have this country that interfere in other countries by the name of protecting their minorities. For example, Iran is claiming that it's protecting the Shia minorities in Yemen, Shia minorities in Lebanon, Shia minorities, I don't know, well, some people say in Iraq they are majority or whatever it is, but they're using the resource of this country. And they didn't ask us if we really want our resource to be spent in civil wars or proxy wars that's happening in this region. And I don't know if any Baluchi taxpayer that's or poor Baluchis that they don't have the electricity in some of villages, they're ready to pay money so Iran can build hospitals for Hezbollah or the region that Hezbollah is living, or any Arab, Ahwazi Arab that's they living in poverty on the land that gives a really huge amount of Iran revenues, because we are a region that it is rich by oil and gas. If really want that the money that comes on the expense of destruction of the environment, we know how the oil extraction affected negatively so many regions, to be sent to be weapon to Yemen or to in Iraq. So that's the problem that we're talking. So we have to give voice to these minorities, that their identity being denied, their political right being denied. So many people think or saying that during the time of previous regime, it was much better, or it was more heavenly and more beautiful, so it is only the fault of mullahs. But it is not the fact. It's this extreme centralization, as some of the speakers said, started with the Pahlavi dynasty. Because before Pahlavi dynasty, during the Qajar dynasty, which was Turkish dynasty, every region was named after the ethnicity that we were living in. Baluchistan, it was for Baluchis, and before it used to name it Baluchistan and Sistan, and now they call it Sistan and Baluchistan. So they want to hide the identity of Baluch there. There was Arabistan for my region, but they changed it and they call it Khuzestan. For them, was especially hard to call a region in Iran Arabistan. And then there is Kurdistan, everybody knows about it, Turkmenistan for Turkmen Sahra for Turkmens, and we have Azerbaijan for Azerbaijani Turks in Iran. So this idea of changing the identity of these people didn't start with this regime, with this Islamic regime. But the difference is, during the time of Pahlavi dynasty, we didn't have the problem of social problem that we have with this regime. During the time of Pahlavi, we had our social freedom. Nobody would have, or in quotation, religious freedom. Nobody would have stopped us if we didn't have a scarf or we didn't pray. But we didn't have political rights. So we did a revolution for the political rights. But what happened, unfortunately, we lost our social freedom and we didn't gain our political right that we seek to have it with this regime. So that I didn't want to repeat in my intervention is, it is all the point that said before, it is totally correct, and I want to echo on that. But there is another thing that it would have been interest to the researchers. One of the reasons also that the Western researchers, they do not talk about so much other ethnicities, beside the fact that there is this domination of Persians, that regime also doesn't allow the visit of the researchers to this region. For example, in my region, Ahwaz or Arabistan, there is 2 international airports. But if anybody wants from the foreigners to go to Iran, they have to go to Tehran, and they have the security screening before entering to the country. So there was some tourists that went to international airport in my region. They had to send them to Tehran to make sure that they are not coming here to, I don't know, see whatever it is in the country. Even when I was lobbying in the European Parliament, they said that even the aid that we gave, for example, for the water or for the sewage or whatever it is, they don't allow the experts to travel in the regions that they have problems. They have to stay in Tehran in their bureau, and nobody allows them to travel. So there's another reason that Western, they don't know much about the ethnicities in Iran. So it is our role to talk about it and echo on it. So it brings more attention to this fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monajan. your talk was great. Now let's see if Nahid Farhad's voice is working.
Can you hear me? No?
It's the same. It sounds like you've got a motor running.
I don't know. We tested before, yesterday, and it's like, okay.
Can you join using your cell phone? Maybe your phone. Maybe it's your laptop, something.
Is it better now?
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so how about we move to our next panelist, and then we get back to you again, hopefully.
I think on a cell phone, but as you know, it would be.
It's fine if I think cell phone is gonna be fine. Maybe no problem with your voice, and camera is fine. So please, yes, log in through your cell phone.
You can just mute your microphone in the room and use the call me feature that I described above up top. Microsoft will actually call you.
There's this call me button.
So if you click on the three dots up at the top where it says more, underneath that there should be a call me button.
Okay.
That's the only option I see. Let me get you a call-in number and I'll send it to you, and I'll send it in the chat. Can you look at the chat on your computer?
Mhm.
Can I continue with the next speaker then?
Please do.
Thank you. Yes. So our next panelist is Dr. Azim Shirani, Speakman of Balochistan Cooperation Council. He holds master's degree in international relations and PhD in historical sciences. He's a human rights activist and a spokesperson for Balochistan Cooperation Council. Please, Dr. Shirani. You are mute.
You have my voice?
Yes, sir. Currently muted again, sir. Still muted. Not muted.
Okay.
Perfect.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the organizer of this seminar that invited me to participate. And talking about the oppressed nation in Iran as a multinational perspective, not possible without paying attention in socio-economical structure and geopolitical situation of Iran in a historical context. As you know, the pre-modern empires, by and large, were characterized by a wide array of diversity. Their colonized nations were free to preserve their cultures, languages, national identities, and moral values, music, arts, and their distinct way of life. Therefore, the Persian Empire wasn't an exception in this regard. So there is a lot of similarity between the empires in the past time. But meantime, as you know, by the end of the First World War, a new colonial spectacle has emerged in Middle East that couldn't tolerate any form of diversity. Furthermore, the new colonial geopolitical structures have adopted a very despotic and monocratic political system. Among prime examples of such geopolitical structures were present day today and Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Iran, and many other countries of the region. The common denominator of all these states has been a domination of one ethnic nationality over other nationalities. But now it may well be argued that so-called the Persian Empire was practically ended by the end of the First World War. However, after the Great War, the strategic interest of British Empire and the interest of Persian subjugator ascended into a joint concert. The result of this mutual concert was the restoration of a current boundaries of Iran and the rise of the Pahlavi regime. The subjugation of other nations such as the Turk, Azeri, the Kurd, the Arab, the Baluch, and others by military force and their annexation into one boundary has left no other option to colonial masters except to enforce their hegemony by the means of brute force. In order to subdue the subjugated people, the ruler of the dominant nation have initiated all sorts of predatory schemes and implemented many inhumane and undemocratic plots to destroy the identities of non-Persian nations in Iran in the name of building a unified nation state. In the course of achieving this, and the non-Persian nations have been marginalized at a different rate. The ruling establishment deployed their military, economic, political, education, language, religious, and their propaganda machine to call into the question the very existence of no-Persian ethnics in Iran. Consequently, the Persian state in this way have concentrated all sorts of power in their control. Monopoly of all power, military, economic, political, and cultural power by Persian ruling establishment have deprived the rest of ethnic nationalities from such power for a complete century. During this entire time, the ruling establishment has counted on a bogus history to justify their colonial policy of forceful assimilation and homogenization. The end result of 1 century of systematic discrimination, repression, military assault, and economic exclusion and depression is the current state of Baluch people or Kurd or other oppressed nationalities and their current borders of Iran. The most progressive and enlightened members of these nations have been imprisoned, tortured, and killed by the Islamic regime and the former regime. Here we can mention that the resources of under discrimination nationalities have been plundered and all their sacred moral, cultural, and social codes have been violated and their integrity has been taken from them and they are forbidden to read and write in their mother tongue or to nurture their arts, music, and culture. In one word, the oppressed nationality have been prevented to utilize their potential to achieve sustainable development. Unless all these so-called ethnic nations are treated as equal under the law, all talks about freedom, equality, justice, and peaceful coexistence fall not short of fertile hot air. Besides, unless the full democratic rights of these discriminated nations are recognized and implemented to the full, there will be no peace and prosperity in this part of the world. Therefore, one law for all nations is the first step in right direction to achieve a sustainable security and development in Iran and worldwide. So, as you know, and before me, another speakers mentioned, really these new revolutionaries, I can say social moment revolutionary of life, woman, freedom in Iran shows that in which route this new movement is going on. It's all about discrimination and misuse of the resources and inability of decision-making policy in Iran, which was mainly dominated by the centralized approaches in whole this century. So we hope all the democratic forces and oppressed nation to be together to get their democratic rights and go toward the social justice for a better future, not only for Iranian people and all surrounding area, but whole worldwide. I hope today by facilities which we have through this media, especially the social media, we can help each other to get new idea and gather our thought and find a better solution for the future of the life. Thank you so much. If there will be any questions, I am in your service. Thanks again for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Shirani. We'll gather questions at the end of our seminar. So thank you so much for your talk. Now we go and check with Ms. Farhad.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's great.
Great,
So,
thank you.
So let me please actually introduce you again to the audience. Nahid Farhad, human rights activist. She's a human rights and political activist based on the United States. In US, she has worked with the Center for Human Rights Documentation for about 8 years. Nahid has extensively contributed to the Persian language media. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarajan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Let me start with this emotional quote. It said, "If I don't go out and protest, who else will?" This quote is the last words of Minu Majidi to her family before she died. Minu was a 62 years Kurd woman. She was shot by security forces on the streets of Kermanshah in the west of Iran. In the ongoing revolution in Iran, women and ethnics were at the heart of conflict. According to human rights activists' reports, since the beginning of this revolution on September 2022, at least 550 people have been killed. Please consider that this number happened in only 6 months, even less than the 6 months, by security forces, including 29 women and high numbers of marginalized ethnic minority groups. Me, as a human rights advocate with many years of experience and the knowledge of how the political system works in Iran, I believe the actual number of people killed is certainly higher. Certainly higher. I want to emphasize that this is not a protest or demand for change. This is an ongoing revolution against one of the most brutal political systems in Homo sapien history. The revolution started after the death of a Kurdish girl in custody. The moral police arrested her because of an inappropriate hijab, as they said. Then she was beaten to death. She was a girl from west of Iran, Kurdish areas, as well as region home of other ethnic minorities like Baluch, Arabs, and Turks, have seen the highest proportion of death. Baluchistan and Kurdistan and Al-Ahwaz face discrimination on the basis of both religion and ethnicity. Let's take a look at Baluchistan, as I mentioned, is a region under discrimination, harsh discrimination. 7-year-old Hasti Norai was from Baluch community. On September 13th, she was in Zahedan, the city of Zahedan, with her grandmother at Friday prayers. A peaceful religious practice. Social media footages from the day show security forces firing into the crowd, includes her. According to local activists, Hasti was hit on her head by a tear gas canister. She died immediately. She was her parents' only daughter and was just 1 week short of her first day at school. Behind the numbers and images are families in shock and grief. Kids who lost their moms and dads, or dads. Parents who lost their beloved kids. In many cases, unable to speak out because of fear of retribution. An ethnic group, which is about 70% of the country, the access to social media is restricted because of systematic oppression policies and long-term systematic underdevelopment policies and approaches. All ethnic regions suffer from weak internet infrastructures, aggressive suppression, and brutal behavior from the government to the local people. I can easily correspond the situation in the ethnical regions with siege conditions from the foreign force or foreign country. Let me explain more. Obviously, Iran's regime dictates strict rules across the country. It is obvious. But in ethnical regions like Kurdistan, Azerbaijan, Al-Ahwaz, Baluchistan, they have taken the residents under siege for the past 4 decades. People are officially banned from talking to their mother tongue, learning their mother tongue, deploying and practicing the cultural events or religious beliefs. If they protest, the answer will be headshot or chest shot immediately. You definitely know about the level of brutality the regime in Iran shows to the Iranian people on a daily basis. It's obvious. I'm here to let you know, if you want to know the reality about daily life in ethnical regions in Iran, you must multiply this brutality of 10. Iran is a multinational country, but this variety has never, ever been recognized by the political systems, not under fanatic mullahs in the past 4 decades, nor under the secular Pahlavi dynasty in the past 50 years. I mean, 90 years together. Iran, with a population of about 87 million, is home of 7 ethnic minorities alongside majority Persians. Minorities have long faced discrimination. Let's start with Kurds. The unrest has been particularly intense in Kurdish region, where the latest wave of revolution first began on September 2022 during the funeral of Mahsa Jina Amini from IG Cemetery. Go to Baluchistan. Some of the deadliest unrest so far was on September 30th in Baluchistan province of southeast Iran. On that day, the security forces opened the fire on unarmed prayers who were practicing salat in the city main mosque. Let's go to Arab region. Iran Arabs, estimated to number 1.6 million, reside many along the border in the southwestern oil-rich province of Khuzestan. They have long complained of inequity in almost every aspect, from employment to political rights to, as one of the speakers mentioned, the ability to name under their own culture. They banned and, as I mentioned, in almost every aspect, all of the rights. Kurds, Baluch, Turk, and Arab people in Iran have suffered deep-rooted discrimination, with their social, political, and cultural rights repressed, and the region facing economic neglect. They are citizens of Iran, but they have always been treated like foreign people who are under Persian supremacy siege. Maybe Aryan race supremacy is a better term to carry over the deep injustice they've been faced in the past 9 decades. Established fanatic system in Iran in the past, I mean fanatic and authoritarian, because the previous one was kind of secular, but they both are believe in the highest possible amount of centralization in power in everything, and a capital of Tehran. In the past 90 years, always suppressed the variety. They deployed the homogeneity, which means
Nahid, you're muted. I'm sorry to interrupt. Somehow you got muted.
Am I good now?
You are now, thank you.
So the established political systems now and before both suppressed the variety. It was the kind of approach. They deployed the homogeneity, which means one nation, one flag, and one sole language. No variety tolerated. No one can challenge them, or the one must be ready for death. But I can see the end of this dark era. I'm here to fight for non-homogeneous Iran. The people of Iran ethnics are fighting too. I believe we will win, and soon we'll see a colorful, diverse, open, and beautiful Iran. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Nahid. It's really making sad to hear the stories you mentioned. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now let's move to our last speaker. Before introducing him, I would like again to ask audience, if you have any question, please write on the chat box. Then after our last speaker, we will consider questions. Thank you. So, our last speaker is Mehdi Jalali Tehrani, a political activist. Mehdi has graduated from. Mehdi, your mic is on, so it's okay. Thank you. So, Mehdi has graduated from UC Berkeley in political science and also from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs in International Security Policy. Mehdi argues that what we see in Iran is not an uprising for regime change. Rather, it is a revolution to change a unitary nation state to a multinational democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? Well,
Yes, we can.
okay, great. Basically, my take is gonna be that I have written here is gonna be like kind of like summarizing what the previous speakers said, and I start from the current situation, what we have seen up to now. To better understanding of the revolution that is happening right now or in last 6 months, we see two regions, the Kurdistan and Baluchistan were highly active in the revolution. And the other region, especially Tehran, the center of Iran, was not that much given the number of people living there. And that's basically gives us some clue that the speakers previously point out and make it relevant what's going on. And at the same time, basically, we see a challenge of a structure, power structure in Iran, and at the same time, challenge of the values, dominant values, given Persian on Shiism. Let me go back a little bit, and two of our speakers talked about the history of the unitary and single nation states in Iran from a century ago, after the World War I, or after, we could say after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And simultaneously with the fall of Ottoman Empire and drawing of artificial borders for the Arab lands by Britain and France, we are witnessing the formation of single state nation in Iran. Iran, which was in competition with the Ottoman Empire, until then was known as the closed kingdoms of Persia, or kind of, we can call it guarded territories, guarded independent territories of Persia, or Persian Empire in general, from 400 years ago. But it was in the constitutional revolution which was happened in 1906. We see the guarded territories of Persia. Basically, you see a kind of, I would not name it primitive, but basic federal system. And these territories, these kingdoms, they didn't have change, but it was like a territory or a states like we see in United States. Different states, like 13 states at the beginning, they are independent, they have the sovereignty to rule on their people. And kind of the same situation was going on in Iran back in 19th century, 18th century. But after the constitutional revolution, Reza Shah was the founder of the Pahlavi regime, came to power by the coup was made by Britain. But Reza Shah was not loyal to British people, because British were busy with the situation in Africa, in Middle East, in the Arab countries. And at the same time, it was in the collapse of the British Empire that happened and ended at the World War II. So Reza Shah tended to be inspired and influenced by Nazi regime of Hitler in Germany. And he used the same pattern, the same style of governance from Hitler to unify the state and nation in Iran with the dominant ideology of Aryans, the race, because Iran see itself as an Aryan country, and Hitler was also claiming Aryan supremacy. But it was a bad gamble, because Hitler lose, and Reza Shah at the same time loses, and he go to exile, and his son came to power. From his point of view and the intellectuals around him that the previous speakers thought, two elements become pillars of the Iran. One was Persian nationalism, and the other one was Shia religion. Persian nationalism was kind of in contrast with Arabs, neighboring Arabs, to distinguish yourself as a different and independent nation. And Shiism also was in contrast with the Sunni people in Arab lands. But Internally, Persian nationalism oppressed other nations in Iran at the time, and Shia religion suppressed and discriminated religious minorities and also women. But today's generation has both the experience of the generations before towards the Persian nationalism of the Pahlavi era and the current experience of the Shia religious government. The systemic discrimination and systematic enforced poverty towards other nations, non-Persian nations, has caused both Persian nationalism and Shia religion not to be considered the two sources of authority to maintain a unique and homogeneous nation state in Iran right now. Basically, Iran has lost these two pillars of nation state structure. Although we should note that the authority of these two sources could have been challenged since 100 years ago, but the discovery of oil made the economic resources in Iran to be in the hand of the central government, and it could use it as a tool of suppression towards minorities, towards peripheral nations, in contrast to Persians that they live in central of Iran. In fact, it can be said that the existence of the ominous triangulation, Persian nationalism, Shia religion, and oil. This triangulation has ruled over Iran in last century. Now we are losing all three. That's what's happening in Iran right now. Today, young people, especially women, especially women of intersectionality, women who belong to non-Persian minorities or non-Shia religion, they are active. They are the agents of the change in this revolution. They have become familiar with the way of life of other developed nations through social networks. They both question the dominant ideological values of the last 100 years and attack the centralized structure of power in the patriarchal society of Iran. They are disillusioned with the position of the Islamic Republic regime and have not hoped for the traditional opposition abroad and in diaspora to and do not consider them as their representative. The figures that you may know today in international stage. There is a struggle between people in Iran and these people, the Reza Pahlavi, the prince of previous Shah, the son of the previous Shah. They don't consider them as their representative because they don't want to see a regime change from the hand of religious government to the hand of secular government. Both are Persian and both advocate a centralized government. Iran's traditional opposition, of which you have probably met several celebrities, only want regime change. Sometimes they say that they want to return to the previous regime and daily civil liberties are enough for them. But in fact, the fact is that instead of changing the regime from religious to secular and power changing between the few monopolistic groups, Iran is undergoing a revolution under a scheme that will transform it from one nation state or unitary nation state to multinational democracy. And at the same time, the uprising shows us that we are challenging the values, the ideology of this regime and previous regime, the Pahlavi regime. So, if I want to summarize my talk, you see these two pillars, Persian nationalism and Shia religion, is collapsing. People are disillusionized with these ideologies. And at the same time, we see the a struggle between those people who just want regime change and very basic civil liberties like not having hijab and or having club dances, whatever you consider as a civil liberties and civil freedoms. To change the regime towards that kind of freedom is on one hand. On the other hand, basically people are challenging both a structure of power and the values that have been dominant in the last century. And as Eileen said at the beginning, we are making history. History is in making, definitely. The revolution in Iran is going on, is not gonna stop. We don't we have reached a point of no return. Definitely it happens. But the pace of revolution may slow down or sometimes it goes up and in a very highly charged fashion. But in general, we see this regime and the whole power structure is going to be ended. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mehdi Jan. It was great points we heard from you. Yes, I also can say we Iranian, we are making history, especially this is revolution of women. So Eileen called it feminist revolution, so maybe it's true. Okay, I would like actually to thank all of the panelists. If you are here, please, turn on your camera, let us also audience see you. If they have any question, actually then they can ask. I have myself a question. Also, I think we have time also from panelists. If any of you have question from another, please feel free to ask. I'm gonna also check the chat box. I noticed, like, I think when Mehdi was talking, so Sina put a comment, protected dominance of Qajar, maybe like Mamalik Mahrous, I don't know, it's
that's much better, yeah, translation. Protected territories, or what was the second word?
It says domination, protected
Dominions.
dominions of Qatar.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, that's a good translation.
Actually, that is, as Mehdi mentioned, 90 years ago, the name of the country right now called Iran was this. So, okay, so I mean, we mean like it is, the one is made upward just in last 90 years. Okay, thank you so much. Also, I'm gonna see if I'm gonna be able to read the question. Actually, first I see from audience, Babak asked like a question from Mr. Tehrani. Perhaps Mehdi, you can also have a look to the chat, but I'm gonna read it. What are some reasons why certain so-called Iranian nationwide opposite groups reject the multinational reality of Iran, and how does their stance differ from that of the current regime under Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, considering the rejection approach of the opposition groups? How do you evaluate the seeking independence of oppressed nationalities in Iran?
Definitely, we have to call it inertia. That if you are privileged as a Persian, for example, me, I'm Persian and so-called Shia. I don't practice religion, and I don't call myself Persian for a while, but I am considered as a Persian and Shia. So when I have privilege, why should I lose it? Why should I give it to the others? This is one point, and the other one is basically ignorance. We as a Persians, we live in a central Iran, and we don't know that much about the other non-Persian minorities. For example, every Iranians, non-Persian Iranians are bilingual. At least they can speak 2 languages, every educated. But we, as a Persians, we can just speak Farsi. So in terms of education, in terms of social force, in terms of everything, in terms of our environment, because we are living in a kind of like not desert, but dry and areas. All of the industries comes to us. Tehran, as Ghalibaf, former mayor of Iran and the Speaker of the Parliament right now, he said in one of the presidential debate, he said that 22% of the Iranian population, they live in the steppe of Tehran, in a kind of like metropolitan city of Tehran, including Karaj and different smaller towns around in periphery of Tehran. 22%. If you are Turk, if you are Kurd, if you are Arabs, if you want to have good access to economy, to source resources, you should be in Tehran. You should move to Tehran, to central cities, or Isfahan, for example. And at the same time, this is the process of assimilation. Basically, you have to be a Persian. You should adopt all of the Persian culture and values, like Shahnameh, whatever you see. And it takes time. Actually, revolution pace, the pace of the revolution is fast. So it doesn't take time, for example, decades. But still it takes time to change whatever was happening and established in the last century during this revolution. And at the same time, in the point of view of the Persian centralists, they call themselves Iranian nationalists. They just want to they just want regime change. It doesn't happen for them, and it takes us a lot of struggle to make it happen as a multinational democracy. I hope I could answer.
Thank you. Also, because it was a good question, also if any of our guest speakers, they want to add comments and answer the question, please feel free. All right, it seems like no comment here. There is another question. It's a long question. I will try to read it. So Shayan actually asking, many of the speakers have indicated the centralized and unitary state as a cause of Iran's problem. Since its founding in the early 20th century, the discourse of the central state in Iran has been substantial on the supposed belief that it is the best political arrangement to ensure the security and economic and social development of Iran. In reality, the central state has had a poor record of managing Iran. However, many Iranian, particularly Persian, still believe that a centralized government is the best way to preserve the integrity of the country. So at the grassroots level, how can we overcome the hegemony of centralization in our country's political discourse, particularly among those social groups that still believe in it? So I'm not sure I actually... Yes.
Actually, I wouldn't call them the Persians. They want a centralized government. The Persians, like ordinary people in the street of Tehran, Isfahan, or central cities, I don't believe that they want a centralized government and they are against any federal form of government or changing the structure. I think the opposition, the traditional opposition, especially in diaspora, they think so. They want so. They want regime change. They want a red carpet in the airport of Tehran, and they come to the Tehran like Khomeini came, and basically the power is changing from this regime to them, and somebody handed the power to them. Something like that. It's a very naive kind of thinking. But this is the Persian opposition in diaspora. Persian opposition, Persian groups, the political group in diaspora does not, they don't represent the Persian people in Iran. Definitely they don't. We see it. We see how the Persian people in social media in Iran, even in diaspora in different countries, how they question the qualification of these opposition groups. For years, I believe that the Persians also have a big issue and problem how to find a real representative, political representative for themselves. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, my mic was open. Hopefully it didn't interrupt you. So I think there is no question, but I have a question. So like,
answer
yes,
the
please.
question. Yes.
Please.
I guess it is important because so many times when we talk about diversity in Iran, so many telling that
where in the world people accept different languages, as if they don't know what is going on all around the world. That's the main problem. And also countries neighboring us, they have system with multiple languages, even that they are not the best democratic countries, like, I don't know, India or other countries. Also, they accepting this diversity of languages. We have countries like Singapore. This country, they have 5 ethnic groups, but they said, okay, we need one common language, vehicle language, and they decided to be English. So it is the neutral language for all of the nation. They can communicate with that, but they can study in their own language, and this language, English, can be a way of communication. So there is always solution if we want to see the solution. And idea of decentralized countries, it is not only it is not only about what we want more power, or we want the power of the be taken away from Persians. No, because when we give the power only to one person, to one nation, to one language, to one religion, always is going to lead to fascism, to extreme hegemony, or only one culture. But when we're taking away this extreme power from them, it's become democracy. Just compare it in this way. Democracy is the vote for all the people. In this way, if we're looking at it on the high level, when we give all this power divided and give it to other provinces, now we're going to have our own kind of also democratic way of accepting diversity. So I would like to say, even Iranian quotation, Persians or extremely assimilated Persians, or not necessarily be Persian, but they are extremely assimilated. They say, oh, it is not possible. But you see them that they are living in Switzerland, that has the contents, and they have 4 languages. Even, I guess, they have a minority that their number is not exceeding 80,000. They are allowed to speak in the language. I'm based in Belgium. There is really a small community of German-speaking people. They have their own universities. When you go to their province, you are not obliged to speak French or Dutch. You speak only German there. But they are proud Belgians. It doesn't mean that they are not Belgian, even though they speak German. Brussels is a 2 bilingual city that unify the country. But for example, when I go to Antwerp, which is capital of Dutch part of the country, they don't have to speak French with me, and everybody speaks Dutch, but doesn't make them less a Belgian. So there is examples, and if we don't want to accept diversity, it's gonna be in the way it's gonna lead to the clash and conflict. So we should see the different experience around the world, and don't say, Iran is not Switzerland. Well, it can be, why not? Iran is not Singapore. It can be, why not? And this division of the power is for the better good for the future of Iran, to prevent, again, authoritarian regimes.
Thank you so much, Mona. Thanks for your great comment. Is any other comment?
Sure. Can I add a comment on Shayan's idea? In Shayan's comment, we see the question of security. In fact, our argument here is that we challenge this perception, this framework. This is ideological framework which views different regions as a threat, as a security threat, and through this justify centralization of power in centers. This is a problematic, and we know that in different parts of the world we have different systems. We have federal systems with power is shared between regions, and they have their own centers. And through this way, we a country develops in all different parts, not just in one center. We have this issue in Iran that we have they transfer water from Ahvaz to Isfahan because they concentrated all factories or economic activities within Iranian center, and this leads to also environmental problems, which suffer local Arab people from it. And I mean, this idea of security and this is a view of domination, authority and sovereignty from center is domination over regions. It is problematic, and that's why we should reject that, and we should call for share of power in terms of economic, political, cultural, like pre-modern Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Wahid, also for your comment. So is there any other comment? Actually, can you read the last question or comment in the chat box? You.
There is no intention on the part of Persian intelligentsia to eradicate racism and walk the path of democracy in Iran. Attend a few book fairs and you'll be shocked by the plethora of racist literature that props up Persian ethno-nationalism. This is all more ironic for our time, as Iranians have never been as literate as today, and empirical data has never been as readily accessible. And then they quote the person, I'm going to mispronounce his name, I apologize, Zaya Ebrahimi R. 2016, The Emergence of Iranian Nationalism, Race, and the Politics of Dislocation, New York, Columbia University Press.
Let me give a comment. I do agree with him, and Zia Ibrahimi was a great scholar. Actually, his works are very educational. And he's one of the few that he's talking about from the conquest of the Arabs in the Sassanid, which is fake. Which that historic event that we all believe it is fake. It's not real. There's a lot of objection to that dominant narrative. Up to now, he is working on Persian nationalism and those kind of things. He is a great scholar, definitely. And you talk about Persian intelligentsia. When you call it Persian intelligentsia, make me, I don't have any objection. Yeah, you're right. Definitely intellectuals, Persian intellectuals, even from leftist group, they still see the Persian supremacy as their driver. And they protect that Persian supremacy. And that's why we are in the revolution. The revolution is not the changing the regime, and even does not mean that we just want to have a change in the structure of power from one regime to another secular regime. The revolution is questioning these values, these setting, this political setting, this structure of power, definitely. Thank you for your very informative comments.
Thank you. Okay, so we almost finished on time, but still I have a question. I would like to ask my question. So as we know, Persian, they are majority in Iran, and then Turks, they are the second, let's say, the second majority or the first minority in terms of population number. That's, sorry if I can make the code. So I'm just wondering, in social media also, you know, like in some talks, we hear that Turk people, they are not right now actually acting against this regime, like they are not attending in protest. as they should. But is it true? I feel like there are some misinformation. Can you just please add any comment and answer this one? Thank you.
Can I answer?
Yes, any of you, please feel free. Yes.
Actually, I don't think we should say we know that Persian are the majority, because according to the Ministry of Education of Ahmadinejad in 2012, he said 70% of the students going to school, they are the Persian is not their first language. So it shows that according to his statistics, 30% of the nation, they have Persian as their first language. And also when you say as first language, we don't know the statistics because they never show, or thankfully we don't have it. I don't know, maybe on our identities, what is our ethnicity, because I don't want to be that divided in the country, because also I am free to choose my identity in this era. I studied in Syria. I feel sometimes Syrian totally. So also we should have this freedom to choose our identity, but also this 30%, we are not sure if they are not also, I don't know, have other languages, but their languages died out, and now their Persian is the first language. Like, for example, Gilan, in Gilak language, that is dying away. Or I know there is some villages in Isfahan, they speak Pahlavi. So do we consider them as Persian speakers? So we shouldn't assume like that really Persian are the majority, because we don't know the numbers. Maybe Turks are the majority, because we have Azerbaijan, we have Turkmen, and we have Qashqai. So we don't really know about numbers, exact numbers. But I think not only Turks didn't participate. I do admit, as an Arab, also my people didn't participate because they were afraid. Because we are afraid again that we go and give again people die. In the future of Iran, we don't have the voice, because now, unfortunately, via Persian-speaking media that we have, they actually forcing this idea that, okay, previous regime was better, maybe we can choose the current son of the Shah to be actually as a leader, maybe we're gonna go back to the monarchy. There is this Persian-speaking or opposition, they are not still accepting the idea of ethnicities. That's the one reason that, at least when I'm talking with the activists with Iran, that outside, the voices that come from outside is not comforting. We don't see that we're gonna get what we wanted, because, for example, my region, one of the reasons that the dynasty of Pahlavi fell down is because all the strike that happened in the oil industry. And then when Khomeini came, they did a massacre, and they killed half of the activists that they helped overthrowing the regime, and half they just run away. So what we feel is that, also Mehdi said, that opposition is not accepting the diversity. Even if they're accepting it really shyly, with a low voice. And that leads, this message goes inside. They are afraid to be part of an uprising and people dying, and then in the end, again, one minority gonna take the power.
Thank you, dear Mona. Any other comments? Please feel free.
Thank you. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was on the stage. I don't know what happened. I went out, then I tried to get back. I wasn't able until now. Anyway, I firstly want to thanks again everybody who really exchanged the knowledge and gave sufficient time to the discussion, had a mutual understanding about the common issues like discrimination and fight for the democratic rights and for social justice. These are actually all societies who reached this stage, and those who are fighting to get it. are same. But the main thing, the comment which I want to do, I hope in the future we had less technical problem and get more friends and more idea and get related to find out the solution, practically solution for the future. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and attending. So any other comments?
Yeah,
Also about my question?
Yeah, related to your question. I think Turks participated in these protests actively. We had protests in Tabriz and Erbil, even in small cities like Mishkin, Khoy, Merand, and other cities. Also in Kerat, we know big population of Turk population live in Kerat. But that's also true that we had more protests in Sunni regions. For example, in Balochistan and also in Kurdish Sunni regions, we had more protests. But if you compare Azerbaijan with this and Turkish cities with Yazd, Isfahan, Kerman, we also witnessed big protests in those cities, or even in Tehran. So I am not agree with this idea, this framing that Turks were not active in these protests, and I mean, if you just Google on YouTube about protests in Tabriz, you could find videos.
And if I may have adding comment to this, which is basically about the Arab Ahwazis. We can say that this revolution started with Arab Ahwazis about 3 years ago. In 2 summers in a row, they came to the street, and it was a long uprising. Never happened before. It was completely unprecedented in the life of the revolutionary Islamic revolutionary regime. Before that, in 2009, at the Green Movement, and before that, we call it the student protest. The people, the Turk nation of Azerbaijan came to the street, but they were denied. They were suppressed by the regime and denied by the Persian media and the opposition in diaspora. So now, if I put myself in the shoes of the Turks, the Azerbaijani Turks or Arabs, what kind of guarantee do I have to come to the street, not suppressed discriminatorily, basically the suppression of the Arabs, Kurds, Turks, Baluch. We saw it in Balochistan, in Zahedan. 120 people were killed right away in one event, in one day. At the same time, in Tehran, regime was using a different kind of brutal apparatus towards the people in Isfahan. But in Zahedan, in Balochistan, was basically it was a state of war. In Kurdistan was a state of war. So, considering this situation, I think that if Arab Ahwazis or Turk in Azerbaijan, they're kind of a little bit considerate what's going on, and they don't see a real picture that they can trust about the future. We don't see that kind of participation. If we want this revolution to succeed, if we want to change the regime, we need to give the people this kind of multi-aspected image. We're gonna have a multilingual, multinational democracies, and all of the nations in the region, they have semi-sovereignty and they can basically manage their own life. If we give this picture, there is no doubt the revolution is going to succeed, and the pace of revolution is going to go higher, higher and higher. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, any other comments? So, yes, Dr. Shirani, do you have any comment? Oh no, I thought you just unmute. Okay, so if there is no comment, I would like greatly thank you, all of you, for your time and information you shared with us. I really enjoyed and just learned a lot from all of you. So no comment, then we call it up. So then have a great evening.
Thank you.
So also thank you, Ken, for helping us and organize setting.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.